So 4.6 deals with completing the square. So what is the solution of each equation? What do we need to do first in order to solve for x in the first equation?
Sure. Get out the x.
We want to get x all by itself. That's our goal.
So divide by 4.
Minus 10 first. So we subtract 10 from both sides. So now we have 4x squared is equal to 36. Now divide by what? 4. So now we divide both sides by 4, and we get x squared is equal to 36 divided by 4? 9.
That's it?
Not yet, because we still have an x squared. We need just x all by itself. So what do you think we have to do next? We do the square root. So that cancels out on the left side, and then we take the square root of 9. So we get x is equal to
3.
plus or minus 3. So when you take the square root, if we had, let's say, a negative 3 squared, this is equal to negative 3 times negative 3, which is 9. So negative 3 satisfies our equation for x too. So that's how we get the plus or minus 3 here.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
So now let's look at B. What do we need to do first? Add 5 to both sides. So they cancel out there. So we get 3x squared is equal to 30. What do we do next? Divide by 3. So we get x squared is equal to what? 10. What do we do next? Take the square root, so it cancels out on the left. So we get x is equal to plus or minus square root 10. We just leave it like that.
Like that?
Yes. Since we start with an x squared, this tells us that we have two values for x that make this equation true. So our two values are going to be a positive square root 10 and a negative square root 10. So if we plugged in a positive square root 10 into here, it would work. And if we plugged in a negative square root 10, it would work. So that's why we have two answers for this, a positive square root 10 and a negative square root 10. Let's go to the next example. Solve the equation by finding the square root. So that's what we just did on the last one. So what do we need to do first to solve for x?
Divide both sides by 2.
Divide both sides by 2. So we get x squared is equal to what?
36.
36. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
What do we do next?
And you square root it.
Then we square root it.
So get x equals plus minus 6.
So x is equal to a positive 6 and a negative 6.
If we don't put the plus or minus, it's automatically wrong.
Yeah. Because then you just got half of it right because you only put a positive 6. But could also be equal to negative 6.
And why didn't you put the square root sign?
What's the square root of 36?
When you can't square root it, that's when you need the square root, right?
Right. So we can only square root perfect squares. So like 4, 16, 25, 36. Any questions on this one? Solve the equation 6x squared is equal to 54 by finding the square root. So what do we need to do first? Divide both sides by 6. So what do we get for our new equation?
X squared equals 9. Okay.
54 divided by 6 is 9. So x squared is equal to 9. What do we need to do next? Square root it. So what do we get for x? X is equal to plus or minus 3.
And if it's negative, you still put plus or minus, right? Like if you're finding, like, when you square root it, there's never going to be a negative, right?
Right. Alright, so today we are going to be completing the square. So we're going to get a trinomial, and our goal is to make it look like this here. So in order to do that, we need to plug in a number here that's going to be b over 2 squared, and we get the b from this number here. So now we're going to do some examples. So what value completes the square for x squared minus 10x? So we need a b over 2 squared. So what's our b? Negative 10 over 2 squared. So what's 10 over 2?
-5.
And what's 5 squared?
25.
25. So our value that completes the square is 25.
Wait,
That's it.
That's it.
wait,
How did you get y?
wait, why is
Don't move yet.
the denominator always 2?
It's always 2. That's what the formula was on the last page. So it's always going to be b. So this number right here, this number, over 2.
Okay.
So it doesn't keep the sign?
So it doesn't keep the sign because it's going to be squared. So even if it was a -5, -5 squared is 25. So it doesn't keep the sign.
Okay, I got it.
And it's always going to be negative, right?
No.
And x is second minus 10.
No, it's not always going to be negative.
So that's gonna be the answer.
25 is our answer.
So what happens if it's positive? Nothing? Is it still positive at the end?
Right, if this was a positive 10, we would get the same answer, 25.
Okay.
So where did the negative go?
I'll show you. So our goal here is to have parentheses squared. We're going to put our x as the first one, and we put this number inside the parentheses as our second number here, and whatever the sign is after our x squared is what's going to go in the middle.
Wait, so 25 is not the answer?
25 is our answer, but this is going to be for like the second part of this, which we're going to do on like slide 10. We're going to have to do this. So I'm just showing you now how we get it.
But on the homework, all we had to put it.
For the first part, the first 8 questions, it would just be 25. You just have to find that number that completes the square.
The first 6.
Yeah, the first 6. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So complete the square. So what's our formula for what's going to go in this blank? B over 2 squared. So what's our b?
-4.
4 over 2 squared. What's 4 over 2? So 2 squared is 4. So 4 is going to complete the square here. But if we were to factor it and put it in these parentheses, what's going to go first in our parentheses?
X.
What goes in the middle?
Minus
Minus 2. Because we get this 2 from here. And the x from here. And the minus.
Isn't the 4 negative or no?
No, because even if this was a -2,
It will still be
-2 times -2 is positive 4.
This is kind of easy.
Ready for the next one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so complete the square. What's going to go in our
B over 2.
b over 2 squared? So what's our b?
10,
So we have 10 over 2 squared. What's 10 over 2?
5,
So 5 squared. What's 5 squared?
25.
25. So 25 is going to complete the square for us. If we were to factor it and put it in the parentheses squared, what's going to go in our parentheses?
X minus 5. X plus 5.
X plus 5 because our equation has a plus sign. So x plus 5.
On your quiz or test, you gotta put that too.
On the first part of the homework, you're just going to put 25, but on the second part, it's going to ask for this, and we're going to do more with it. But for the first part, you're just going to leave, it'll be clear in the directions of the homework. Okay? So what do we need to complete the square here?
B over 2 to the second.
B over 2 squared. What's our B?
2.
So we have 2 over 2 squared. What's 2 over 2?
1.
What is 1 squared? 1. So here in our parentheses, what's going to go inside?
X plus 1.
X plus 1. So we get our x from here and our 1 from in here. Okay, so next we're going to solve an equation by completing the square. So this is when that factoring, and we put the things in the parentheses squared, is going to come in handy, and we're going to do that every time. So these are the steps of how we're going to do it, but we're going to just go to the example. So what's the solution of x squared plus 4x plus 4 is equal to 25? So the first thing we need to do is get the 4, the number without any x's next to it, on the other side of the equal sign. So how do we move that 4 to the other side?
Minus 4.
We need to subtract 4 from both sides. So our new equation is going to be x squared plus 4x. I'm going to leave a space. And what's 25 minus 4? 21. So in this space is where I'm going to put b over 2 squared. Bless you.
Thank you.
So what's our b?
4.
4. What is our, 4 over 2 squared. So what's 4 over 2? 2 squared. So on the left side of the equation, we're adding 4 here. We're just pulling this 4 out of nowhere. So on the right side, in order to keep the equation balanced, we have to add 4 also. So since we're adding 4 here with this 2 squared, we also have to add 4 on the other side of the equal sign.
Why are you adding 4 to the...
Because that's what this 2 squared is. That's 4. 2 squared is 4. So now in our parentheses, what are we going to put?
X plus 2.
X plus 2. So we get the x from here and the 2 from here and the plus sign here. So x plus 2 squared. And what's that going to be equal to?
25.
So we add 21 plus 4.
5.
So 25.
So that'll be answer X.
Not yet. So now, in order to get x all by itself, because our goal is to solve for x, how do you think we're going to undo this equation? If it's being squared, what do we need to get rid of that squared?
By the actual square root.
We'll take the square root. So we take the square root of both sides, so this cancels out, and then we take the square root of 25. So on the left side, we're going to get x plus 2. And what are we going to get on the right?
5.
Just 5?
5 to the second.
Negative 5.
What'd you do in the homework yesterday?
What?
5.
When you took the square root of something in the homework yesterday, what'd you get? Was it just 5 or?
5. Is it 5 to the x? 5x?
X squared equal 5.
X plus
X plus 2 equal 5.
Wait. Plus or minus.
Plus or minus 5. So when you take the square root of 25, the answer is plus or minus 5.
I have a question.
Is-
If there's no square root, you have to leave the square root sign and put plus or minus inside.
Plus or minus on the outside, but yes.
I'm still confused on why you said the plus 4.
Me too.
Okay, so here, when we do this b over 2 squared,
Yeah.
we get 4 over 2, so we get 2 squared.
Yeah.
So 2 squared is 4. So I pulled this, I included this number in our equation just like randomly. I added it out of nowhere. Okay, I didn't bring it from the other side. I added a 4 to this equation. But in order to keep the equation balanced, if I add 4 to one side, I have to add 4 to the other.
Wait, why'd you add 4?
Because I added the 2 squared.
Two squared equals 4.
I know, why do you add it?
Yeah, so.
Because I added it in order to get this. Because this is gonna help us solve for x. So we need to get this. In order to do that, we have to do b over 2 squared. We have to include a b over 2.
All the equations like that?
Yes. So let's finish this one and then we'll do the next example and then I'll answer some questions. Okay?
I'm very confused on
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, because you brought back the 4 to the second part.
Wait, so what's the answer?
2 squared, you brought.
What's
So you added 4 to it?
X plus
Not yet. We're not done yet.
Oh, so that, oh, okay.
So now do you get this?
I was confused.
What?
It's still the first example. So
It kind of looks like you said plus 4 to the 2 squared.
no, this
That means
this
it's-
means the same thing here.
Yeah. That's where I got confused.
Okay. So we're not done yet. So we have x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 5. We're going to split this up into two equations. So we have x plus 2 is equal to a positive 5 and x plus 2 is equal to negative 5. So now we subtract 2 on both sides, so we get x is equal to 3. And again, in our second equation, we're going to subtract 2, so we get x is equal to negative 7. So this here is our answer.
Yeah, that's
It's a lot of steps.
Is there gonna be a video?
Yes.
Is that gonna be on the quiz?
Yes.
You know what's in the back of my brain? You know what these back there.
All right, let's do the next example, and hopefully it'll make more sense. Yes. Yes.
It's the most special game.
So it says, how can you rewrite the equation so the left side of the equation is in the form x plus a squared? So we have x squared plus 12x. What's the first thing we're going to do here in this equation?
Subtract
Minus
5.
5.
We have to subtract 5 in order to get the 3 to the 5 on the other side with the 3. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides.
Negative 2.
So we get negative 2 on the right side. So now in this space, we're going to plug in our b
B squared.
over 2 squared. What's our b?
12.
So 12 over 2 squared. What's 12 over 2?
6.
6 squared. So on this side of the equation, we're adding a 6 squared.
36.
So we're adding a 36 over here. So I need to add a 36 on this side too. Yes.
Okay.
Do you just add the same number that's like 12 to that equation? Like. And
Okay.
Then you have to add the 36 to that side.
Right. So I put 36. This is equal to 36. So I'm adding 36 on this side of the equation. So I need to add 36 on that side too.
Oh, you multiplied.
Oh,
Oh.
6 squared. Yeah. 6 times 6. So now we have our parentheses squared. What's going to go inside our parentheses?
X plus 6.
X plus 6. We bring the x, the plus sign, and the number in the parentheses here, which is 6. What is it going to be equal to?
34.
34. What do we need to do next?
Square root.
Square root it.
You get x plus 6 equals positive and negative 34.
Perfect. X plus 6 is equal to plus or minus square root 34. So we're going to have two equations here.
thank you.
X plus 6 is equal to
34.
a positive square root 34, and x plus 6 is equal to a negative square root 34. You have to write the square root. So now in our first equation, on the left, how do we solve for x?
Oh, subtract 6.
Subtract 6. So we get x is equal to a negative 6 plus square root 34. And we can't combine the 6 and the square root, so we just leave it like that. And then because we can't add a whole number and a square root.
Oh, but if it's square rooted like 5, it'll be fine. You can add it.
If it was the square root of 5.
Like if it was 25.
But if it was the square root that we can't simplify, we can't add a whole number to it. So we're just going to leave it like this.
When you're done, I have a question.
Okay, and then our second equation, we're going to, x is equal to negative 6 minus square root 34. Perfect. So our two answers for this problem are x is equal to negative 6 plus square root 34 and x is equal to negative 6 minus square root 34. All right, so here we need to solve for x. What do we do first? Subtract 9 on both sides. So what's our new equation going to be? X squared plus 6x is going to equal negative 8. What's going to go in this space here? So 6 over 2 squared. What's 6 over 2?
3.
So 3 squared. So 3 squared is 9. So this means that we're adding 9 to the left side, so we also need to add 9 to the right side too. So in our parentheses, what are we going to get?
X plus 3 equals 1.
X plus 3 is equal to 1. Perfect. So now we square root it. So the square root and the squared cancels out. And what's the square root of 1? 1. So we're going to get x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 1. So we're going to split this up into our two equations. So we have x plus 3 is equal to a positive 1, and x plus 3 is equal to a negative 1. When Brett comes back. So how do we solve for x with our first equation? Subtract 3. So you get x is equal to negative 2. What about our second equation? And x is equal to negative 4.
Does anyone have a charger?
Okay, last one. What do we need to do first? So we subtract 2 from both sides. So what's our new equation going to be?
X squared plus 4x b over 2 squared equals negative 2.
So here we're going to put our b over 2. What's our b?
4.
So 4 over 2 squared.
2.
4 over 2 is 2.
4.
So we put a 2 squared. So we're adding 2 squared on the left. What do we need to do on the right? Add 4. So in our parentheses,
X plus 2.
Terrell, what goes in the parentheses?
X plus 2.
And Kyler, what's going to go on the right side of our equation?
2.
2, because we add these two. So we get a 2.
Are you getting all that?
Kyler, what do we do next?
Oh, I got you. You got square root.
Thanks, Terrell. We take the square root. So what do we get? What's our new equation?
It's gonna be x plus 2 equals 1.
That's why you don't listen to Terrell. The square root of 2, we can't simplify it, so we just leave it as square root of 2. So now what do we do?
Then you subtract by 2.
So we subtract 2. So we get x is equal to minus 2 plus or minus square root 2.
Oh, did you realize that we have no space in the homework?
Okay, so that's everything for 4.6. So go ahead and open up the homework from yesterday.